right, everybody. So we're trying something a little bit different today because I'm trying to use up these gigantic Post-it notes. I know that's not what it looks like, but they are in fact giant Post-it notes. So today we're going to talk about one of the biggest grammatical problems that students tend to encounter when they're first starting off writing, and even now. I mean, these are still issues I have to go back and double check myself on. So today we're going to talk about commas and how to use commas within your writing. So there's an old way of kind of examining when you want to use a comma in your writing. And generally speaking, that's to read it out loud. When you get to a point that you feel there should be a natural pause, or you need to take a breath before you continue with the sentence that you're reading, that's generally a good indication that some type of punctuation is missing. Now, maybe you just have a really, really long run-on sentence and you need to figure out a way to divide it into more than one sentence. So that's entirely possible. Another time is if you are listing, if you are trying to convey information that's not relevant to the sentence, if you're trying to use an introductory phrase or something like that, then commas are going to be the way to go. So with that being said, I thought I would take a look at a couple of the main issues that tend to crop up. So when you have a conjunction, and conjunctions are words that appear in the middle, generally speaking, of a sentence, for, and, but, or, those type of things. So right here, we have and. So whenever you have one of those within the sentence, generally speaking, you're not going to want to use the comma directly in front of them. So let's try reading it out loud. The social issues can be seen in cities and in the country. So there isn't really a natural pause after cities where it's telling us we need a comma. So what we're going to do is just kind of take that out. So if we had read it with the comma, it would have sounded something like, the social issues can be seen in cities and in the country. So it's not really a natural way of speaking or writing. So instead, we want, the social issues can be seen in cities and in the country. That's how we would normally talk. That's the lack of a natural pause there that you would typically see in this instance. Now, just because you see the word and doesn't mean that you can't use a comma, especially if it's in a list. If you were saying like, I'm going to the movies with Bill, comma, Ted, comma, and Christy, then you would want to make sure you differentiated the different items or people, in this case, that you're listing by having commas after them. All right, so anytime you have a conjunction, you generally are going to want to avoid having a comma directly before that. All right, so with the next one, we don't want to have a comma in between our subject and then our verb. So the item that is performing the action and the action. If you need more notes on that, you may want to go back and watch the previous video on constructing sentences. We go through the subject, verb, object way of viewing writing a lot more in depth than that. So here, if we were to read it the way that it says, happily, the waiters sat down for a break. So there's a lot of pausing there that doesn't generally happen when we are speaking. So let's take a look at it if we were to remove the commas. Happily, the waiters sat down for a break. So in this case, this is okay. So it's describing the waiters. But here, the waiters are a subject, sat, that's our verb, we have a comma right there, and you're not supposed to have a comma between your subject and your verb. So we're going to go ahead and take that out. So instead, it would read, happily, the waiter sat down for a break. And so we get that natural pause in the beginning there, but then remove the unnecessary comma between the subject and the verb. And then finally here, you don't want a comma, similarly to you don't want a comma between the subject and the verb. You also don't want one between the verb and the object, or the action and what the action is being used upon. So here, we'll read it like they have it. On her way home, she bought a book at the new bookstore. So on her way home is somewhat of an introductory phrase, so we'll kind of leave that alone. She bought, well, she is our subject. Bought, to buy, is our verb. And what is she buying? Our object is the book, or a book. So we don't want to have a comma in between our verb and our object. So it should read more like, on her way home, she bought a book at the new bookstore. All right, so try really, really carefully to read things aloud when you're doing your writing, especially when you're checking it afterwards. Your ability or inability to read it as naturally as you can either tells you you have too much punctuation, you have sentences that are way out of control in terms of length, or it's something is clunky about the way that you're doing it. So you either need to take out punctuation, put in punctuation, or shorten or lengthen your sentences if it's sounding kind of choppy, or if it just seems like the sentence is going on forever. All right, so those are just a few. There are more, and I will get to the different types of comma issues. But for right now, make sure that when you have a conjunction, you don't have any type of comma directly before it. Make sure there are no commas between your subject and your verb, and make sure there are no commas between your verb and your object. All right.